This is the new 2024 Subaru Crosstrek Wilderness, which is a new off-road adventure version of the Subaru Crosstrek, which is itself an off-road adventure version of the Subaru Impreza. Today, I'm going to review the new Crosstrek Wilderness and show you all of its quirks and features. Today's video is sponsored by Cars and Bids, which is my online car auction website for modern enthusiast cars. So far, Cars and Bids has hosted more than 20,000 car auctions of special, cool, and interesting cars like this, and this, and this, and this. So, if you're looking to buy or sell an enthusiast car, do it on Cars and Bids. All right, time for the quirks and features of the Crosstrek Wilderness. And I'm going to start with the basics. So, brand new model based on the brand new Subaru Impreza. The Impreza is fully redesigned for 2024, and this car comes out with it. Now, the Wilderness is an off-roady adventure version of the Subaru Crosstrek, which, like I said, is already an off-roady adventure version of the standard Subaru Impreza. And speaking of the new Impreza, one interesting thing for the 24 model year, the new redesign, there is no more sedan version being offered. The Impreza is now only available as a hatchback. You can still get the WRX as a sedan only, but there will be no more Impreza sedan. Of course, also true of the Crosstrek and the Wilderness. Now, under the hood, the new Impreza is offered with two available engine choices. There's a 2-liter flat 4 with about 150 horsepower, or you can upgrade to a 2.5-liter flat 4 with about 180 horsepower. In the Wilderness, only that larger, more powerful engine is standard. You don't have to worry about the base level stuff. Now, also on the subject of powertrain, manual transmission is gone from the Crosstrek for the new 2024 model, automatic only this year, and the Wilderness has one big upgrade here. In addition to more standard power, extra towing capacity. A Crosstrek can only tow about 1,500 pounds, but the Wilderness boosts that to 3,500 pounds thanks to some additional cooling, which allows you to pull more stuff and fits in with its Wilderness adventure theme. And the Crosstrek Wilderness gets a lot more upgrades than just that. Let's start with off-road capability. So, the regular Impreza has 5.1 inches of ground clearance. The Crosstrek is significantly lifted, about 8.7 inches. The Wilderness has an even bigger lift, another 0.6 inches of ground clearance on top of the Crosstrek. So a lifted version of a lifted version of a hatchback. The result is that this has more ground clearance than a Ford Bronco Sport Badlands or a Jeep Cherokee Trailhawk, which are undoubtedly the most off-road focused compact crossovers. Even though this is merely a lifted hatchback, it beats out those. And with the lift and some styling changes comes better approach angle, better departure angle, and better off-road breakover angle as well. Plus, there are other off-road capability upgrades like a skid plate in front to protect important components under the car, and the Wilderness comes standard with these Yokohama Geolandar all-terrain tires, which obviously improves capability even further, getting off the pavement. And if you like to go explore the Wilderness, you also have another great benefit in the Wilderness, which is the roof rack. That can carry up to 700 pounds, which means you can set up a rooftop tent and then camp on the roof of your Wilderness if you so desire. And there are some other less important but still notable changes that help improve the Wilderness capability off the pavement, like fog lights, which come standard on the Wilderness model, as you can see, LED fogs, and this giant hood decal, which Subaru says is anti-glare. If you're somewhere off-roading, sun is beating right down, this will help minimize the glare a little bit, which does help. You also have plastic. a lot of plastic. The front bumper and grille have transformed into this large, unpainted plastic piece, as you can see. Same deal in the back. The rear bumper, this large plastic piece, different from a painted bumper you'd see on most vehicles. And then on the sides, you have significantly more plastic cladding. Above the wheels, by the doors, there is plastic all throughout the exterior of this car. Now, the plastic has two functions. Number one, because it's unpainted, kind of basic plastic, it's more scratch resistant than painted surfaces. Your off-roading, tree branches, rocks hit your stuff. You don't have to go repaint something because you have all this plastic. Number two function of the plastic is to make the car uglier. There's no doubt that it is a little weird looking with all of this excess plastic on the outside. It's certainly a bit opinion splitting, a little polarizing, but regardless of your thoughts, this is what Subaru has done to create the Wilderness. They've given it lots of exterior plastic. And there are some other exterior changes too that are, well, frankly, purely cosmetic. One is the copper accents throughout the exterior. Up in the front, you can see little copper accents near the plastic bumpers. Also on the roof racks, you got these copper accents near the front. And on the side, it says Crosstrek, and this car's distinctive copper color. And in the back, you also have additional copper accenting. I guess this is to help distinguish the Wilderness from the standard Crosstrek, make it stand out a little more, give it sort of a special theme. And more notable cosmetic upgrades. For one, black wheels. All of the Wilderness models come with them. That's the latest trend, and the Wilderness is jumping on board. You also have Subaru printed in massive letters on the rear bumper, as I'm sure you saw before, just to make sure everybody knows this is a Subaru. In addition to that rather large badge, there's other large badging throughout this car, Wilderness badges, that are pretty big and pretty pronounced on the back and on the sides, just to let everybody know this is not your standard Crosstrek, no, this is the Wilderness. And next we move inside the Wildernessy Crosstrek Wilderness, where there are more Wilderness upgrades. Like, for example, the seats, which you can see are this kind of odd material. It's called StarTex, and it's a synthetic sort of faux leather that makes them more water resistant. So when you're out there in the Wilderness doing wildernessy things, you can wilderness the wilderness. You can clean off the seats easier if they get muddy or dirty. You also have rubber floor mats, as you can see, with this cool kind of off-road tire tread design, which does improve your capabilities. You can go off the pavement and not worry about getting your floor mats dirty or muddy, since cleaning them is easy. Then, by the way, those floor mats are not just for the footwells below the seats. You also have a rubber floor mat in the cargo area, as you can see here, a huge rubber Wilderness floor mat to make it easy to hose down with a cool design on it, just like the ones in the footwells. And you have cargo area cup holders in the Wilderness. Subaru tells me this is distinctive to the Wilderness. You don't get it in the standard Crosstrek, so if you want to carry drinks in your cargo area, you must upgrade to a Wilderness. Also worth pointing out that obviously all Crosstrek models, all Impreza models come standard with all-wheel drive, but if you get a Crosstrek, you get the X-Mode drive mode system, which includes various different configurable drive modes based on the terrain you're on. This is not unique to the Wilderness. It's on all Crosstrek models, but still worth pointing out since it's on the Wilderness too. And there are some cosmetic touches inside the Wilderness to distinguish it from a standard Impreza. For example, you get gold stitching on the seats, intended to match those copper gold accents on the outside, bring some of that color in here. And that same copper is on the base of the steering wheel, again to reinforce the Wilderness copper-colored theme. And imprinted into the headrest, you have the Subaru Wilderness logo, which looks kind of cool and, again, adds a little bit of flair and character to the Wilderness. By the way, it's also worth pointing out a couple of cool mountain images hidden inside this car. One on the rear door sill, kind of going up the side. You won't really notice it that often, but it's there. You also have one on the rear scratch plate in the cargo area, this mountain image going across that includes a graphic of a Crosstrek driving through the mountains, which is kind of cute. And you also have mountain imaging in the base of the cup holders here up front. You can see little mountain graphics, although this mountain section is removable. You can just pull this out. If you don't like mountains, you don't have to see them in your cup holders. Just take them away. So those are all the wilderness upgrades compared to the Crosstrek and the standard Impreza. You might be wondering what this costs. The answer is it starts around $33,000 including shipping. Now, an Impreza starts around $24,000 and a Crosstrek starts around $26,000. This has a lot of additional upgrades over the Crosstrek, although it is a fairly substantial price bump to get the wilderness, and so it will probably only go to the most wildernessy of enthusiasts. But beyond all the wilderness stuff, let's talk through the rest of the quirks and features in this car, starting in the obvious place, the infotainment system, which is the big news for the redesigned 2024 Impreza. Giant vertical infotainment screen, huge, captivates the entire center of the dashboard, and it really is impressive for a car like this, a compact car, compact crossover in this case, to have a screen this big, almost Tesla-like in terms of size. So let's go through it. Along the top row of this infotainment screen, you have a configurable little screen that shows a few different available pieces of information. You have some vehicle info up here. You have the weather, if you want it. You have your current drive mode with that X mode all-wheel drive system, and you have your Bluetooth all visible on this little screen. Now, the rest of the screen is of course available for all of the rest of the functions, vehicle settings, Bluetooth music, all the stuff you'd need an infotainment screen for, and that unfortunately includes climate controls, which are on the bottom. Yes, the climate controls are now integrated into this giant infotainment screen, but it's worth pointing out that Subaru has kept a few of the most important controls as physical buttons. Specifically, the temperature control. Driver and passenger side, you can still raise or lower the climate control temperature with physical buttons, and rear window defroster, front window defogger are still physical buttons as well. You don't have to go into the menu for those, but the rest of the stuff is at the bottom of the screen, thankfully fixed in place, but still there. Also worth pointing out, by the way, Subaru has kept a couple of other things as physical buttons, the volume knob here as you can see, and the tuner knob over on the other side. Speaking of physical buttons, by the way, one other climate function that isn't integrated into the screen, your heated seats, which are mounted here in the center console, this high-low rocker switch that Subaru has been using for heated seat controls since the dawn of time. They're still using this very same switch today, and it hasn't migrated into the screen. Now, in terms of this screen, I will say I do have one disappointment, which is the camera situation in this car. You only have a backup camera. As you can see, it's here. The quality is pretty good, but that's it. Subaru prides itself on safety. Its eyesight system that can stop the car, featured in a lot of vehicles and very useful. It would be nice to get a top-down camera system or more camera technology in this car, which would add to the safety, and it would help take full advantage of this giant screen. A great 360 camera here would be wonderful to see, but sadly, we don't have it. But anyway, next up, moving beyond the screen, a few other interesting quirks and features. One is charging, where you have basically all types. You can see USB-A and USB-C chargers here in the center control stack. Below that, you have a wireless charging pad for your devices, and in the center console, you have a traditional 12-volt cigarette lighter style outlet. Onto the steering wheel, which is, well, frankly, pretty self-explanatory. Nothing too unusual or special here, except you have buttons marked S and I. You might be wondering what that is. It's basically a sport mode and an eco mode. S, of course, being sport, and I is supposed to stand for intelligent, but really it functions as a bit of an eco mode and tries to slow down responses a little bit to save you some fuel. And as for the gauge cluster behind the steering wheel, it's fairly simple, in keeping with the theme of most Subaru cars. Simple, durable. That's true here. No gauge cluster screen yet. You have traditional old school analog gauges with a smaller screen in the middle. Now, nothing too special about that center smaller screen, although I do love the fact that it shows you the cumulative fuel that you have saved in start-stop mode, shutting off the car. A lot of enthusiasts hate this, turns the car off at stoplights, can be kind of annoying. Well, here, it actually gives you a breakdown of how much fuel you've saved, and gives you the benefit of start-stop mode, which is neat to see. And next up, we move on to the back seats in the Wilderness, which are, well, fairly basic. There's not too much interesting stuff back here, although you still get the same water-resistant seating material that you had up front, and you have the same gold stitching to, again, tie in the Wilderness special copper gold color even to the back seats, and you get a surprisingly roomy back seat, which really does shock me. I don't think of this as a very big car, as a familyable car, but I'm sitting back here, a very tall adult. My head still has a couple inches from the roof. My knees are up against the front, but it's positioned where I would sit as a tall person, and frankly, it's got decent space. Not as much room as a Honda CR-V or Toyota RAV4, but not that much less. And I think if you wanted to use this as a family car, especially with a young family and smaller children, rear seat room shouldn't be the reason that you would say no. It does have a big enough back seat. It's pretty good. Now, other than that, again, really not much going on back here. You do have charge ports, USB-A and USB-C in the center, but they take the place of any sort of rear seat climate vent, which some other cars do have in this segment. And there's no storage pocket situation down here. You just have those chargers, which is fine. Now, in the center armrest, you put that down and you have a couple of cup holders, which is also fine, and they supplement the ones that you already have inside your door pocket. Other than that, nothing too quirky or interesting in the back seat of the Wilderness. And finally, we move on to the cargo area of the Wilderness. You pop open the tailgate, not power operated, by the way, and you get, well, the cargo area, which is nothing particularly special. I already showed you the mountain design on the scratch plate, the rubber floor mat. Of course, you also have a cargo cover. It's not particularly large back here. Compared to the RAV4 and the CR-V, it also feels smaller back here, just like it did in the back seat. Now, that's an intentional choice for some people who choose this car just because it's smaller and has a smaller footprint than those SUVs. But just so you know, the Crosstrek and the Wilderness don't necessarily have as much space in back as some of their SUV rivals. All right, driving the Crosstrek Wilderness. First thing I want to say, before I get to the driving experience, since I've had this press car for the last few days, I've been noticing other Crosstreks around. Wow, there are a lot of them. It is amazing to me how popular this vehicle has become. And it's kind of a blend in, don't really notice, don't really care type of car for enthusiasts, and so you don't really realize it, but they are everywhere. Even in Southern California, where no one has needed all-wheel drive for anything ever, it's just a lifestyle, a vibe. People want it, and boy is it doing well. It reminds me of growing up in Denver when the Outback was first coming out back in the mid-late 90s, and how often you'd see them. That's the Crosstrek now. But let's talk driving experience, and I gotta say, for what this vehicle is, I think the driving experience is pretty excellent. And I give that "for what this vehicle is" caveat, because this is not a luxury car. It's not intended to be a performance car. And once you get those two things out of the way, then you can start appreciating this car for what it is. You do hear some noise, some road noise, some wind noise. Not bad, not egregious. Even on the highway, I'm not hearing a lot of tire. I'm not hearing a lot of the cars going by, but it's also not a Mercedes S-Class where you're totally insulated from the outside environment. You hear some stuff as you'd expect in a car that's about at this price point. The materials inside are about the same. The stuff that you feel, the stuff that you touch, I kind of touched on it earlier and showed you, but just driving it around, you get that feeling reinforced. It's very nice, it's fine for what it is, but again, not a high-end opulent luxury car or anything of the sort. You're getting kind of a utilitarian vehicle, and that's that. And the same goes for performance. Subaru has over the years added more power to the Crosstrek, which has always been a drawback of this car in the past. But even now, even with the latest power boost, this is not a fast car. It is a usable car. You can accelerate up highway on-ramps and pass people and such, but it's not fast. You're not gonna get thrills out of this car. Your thrills are gonna come from taking it into the Wilderness and seeing all the cool, I don't know, bighorn sheep from the comforts of your Subaru. It will not come from the fun of driving this car. But you get past those things, and what you are left with is just a good car, a good utilitarian drivable car. You feel sturdy, you feel reliable, you feel relatively tough. It is just a nice car. And I have to say, the steering is nice and communicative, quicker than I expect. You know, everybody talks about how quick like the Mazda CX-5 steering is. To me, this feels better than that, kind of owing to Subaru's heritage as a fun car manufacturer as well. And just overall, it's a nice car. It drives well, it's good, and you compare it to, there's a Crosstrek, you compare it to like a Honda CR-V, there's a Crosstrek, you know, a Toyota RAV4, you can see why people are starting to like these cars. Not starting to, I mean, they're already popular, but they offer a little bit of ground clearance, but you don't necessarily have the height or the size of a vehicle like a RAV4 or a CR-V. There's a Crosstrek, and it works. It drives well. There's a Crosstrek. I'm serious. It drives well, and it's like a nice, usable, drivable vehicle. Like a lot of Subarus, it doesn't over-deliver, except in the way that it just feels like good, usable, totally reasonable car that you kind of get the feeling you could get a lot of miles out of. And I must say, driving around, I've had this feeling like, oh, I blend in so much. Compared to the stupid cars I drive that attract so much attention, this car is good for its almost just like daily usability without any sort of BS at all. And now the benefit of this Crosstrek is there's a Crosstrek, you can take it off-road and you can really actually go somewhere with it. In the past, the Crosstrek has been a nice lifted Impreza and it's had a few capabilities, but now it has like legitimate crossover competing capabilities where you can do some stuff with it and actually really go places and tow a little bit, but enough for most people. And frankly, that makes this car, there's a Crosstrek, that makes this car exactly what most people are looking for. And I think it's really a home run in terms of like value for the money, usability. You can't, there's a Crosstrek, you can't want something like really, really insane and special because that's not what it is. And so that's the new 2024 Subaru Crosstrek Wilderness. A little hatchback that became a taller hatchback that became a off-roader almost SUV. It's a little weird looking, but there's a lot to like here. And now it's time to give the new Crosstrek Wilderness a DougScore.
And the Crosstrek Wilderness ends up here, 47 out of 100, which puts it here against rivals and some other relevant cars. It's in the middle of the pack, and I think that's okay. The Crosstrek Wilderness is a bit pricey for what it is in a way that would appeal to most people, but it's supposed to be sort of a niche product specifically aimed at off-roader types who are willing to spend more to get more capability. Real competition comes from the Ford Bronco Sport, which has a lower base price, more power, more equipment, similar capabilities, and the all-important Bronco name, but the Wilderness holds its own as a competitive rival.